So, hey, we're live. Thanks everyone for hopping on today. I'm
Yeah.
re- yeah, I'm really excited to have Jeannie on. So, Jeannie had me on her
Mm.
Substack live stream a few weeks ago and really just opened up the room for me to talk about my story and my really like chronological journey with porn in my life from when I was a kid to where I'm at now.
Yeah.
And I really wanted to have Jeannie on the Porn Free Millennial podcast because Jeannie's a licensed counselor. You're the founder of the Restoration Center, and you have a great Substack, Restoration Center Encouragement,
Yeah.
um, where you're really focused on helping people navigate emotional healing, spiritual renewal, and relational restoration. And so today, first wanted to say you're the first woman that's on the podcast on Porn Free Millennial.
All right.
And what a great person to have on because you have so much experience. I think you've been in counseling now for how many years? I think it's over 30, right?
Well, I've been doing nutrition counseling for 40. I'm a dietitian.
Wow.
That's when I started out, yeah, working with people who had eating disorders and things like that. And then I went and got a master's degree in counseling in 1990. So, yeah, it's been a little while.
So you have a lot of experience working with people and
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
so yeah, and today really wanted to dive into I think just from your perspective, porn's impacts on mental health, on relationships,
Yeah.
also on just personal growth, and then just steps to heal, to overcome this, and just from what you've seen. So I think just to dive into it, if you want to talk a little bit about yourself, just how you got into counseling
Yeah.
and
Yeah. I'll
yeah,
do.
we can do that first.
Yeah, I think that would be great because I'm kind of a untraditional, probably counselor, and I'm certainly not a porn exclusive counselor.
Sure,
So I
sure.
wouldn't even say I'm an expert, but because I work with people who are dealing with, they're stuck, they're stuck with stuff. So, somebody might come in for marriage work and it turns out the husband's dealing with porn. So it kind of, people don't find me because of porn, but usually it shows up somehow. So anyway, so yeah, as I mentioned, I started out as a registered dietitian over 40 years ago. My dad, this is probably significant. My dad was a compulsive overeater.
Mm,
And I saw, so addiction is in my family. His dad was an alcoholic. I would say my dad was more of a food person, foodaholic. And I got really interested in health because of that. I was kind of like, oh, I saw what my dad went through and all of that. And so I went to school and studied nutrition and became a registered dietitian. And then when I started dealing with people and their food stuff, I'm like, oh my gosh, this is like, there's a lot going on with people. It's just not a matter of
right.
like helping people understand about nutrition. It was like I was bumping up against so many problems, kind of traumas and things like that they were eating because of that.
Mm,
And so that's when I went back to school, did a graduate degree in counseling just to help me with my nutrition clients. And I really specialized, I would say for years, working with eating disorders. I really preferred compulsive overeating, but I saw anorexia, bulimia.
mm,
Um, and at the same time, and this is what the interesting piece about me is because I'm a person of faith, I'm a Christian, and I started to do a lot of ministry in my church and
mm,
helping people pray through things that they were going through. And it was like separate from my counseling, but I started to see more and more like an overlap because people would come in for prayer about whatever, marriage problems or addictions
right.
or whatever. So this is the long story short. Finally, in let's see, whew, 2019, I felt like God was saying, I want you to go to seminary. I'm like, I'm not going to seminary. I'm like, no, by this time I'm late 50s. But I really felt like that's the way he was leading me. And so I went to seminary for 3 years and got a master's degree in divinity. And I could see
Wow.
what he was doing. And it was about that time that he gave me the name. restoration center, because what I was starting to do by then was I was working with people, their bodies physically, emotionally, hence the counseling. And then there was the spirit piece that I was seeing more and more was important. Like,
Mm.
because, you know, I would say most of my clients know Jesus. I have a few that don't, and that's okay. It's not a requirement. But I think when you get to know God and and you have a relationship with Him, my experience is healing is quicker
Mm.
because He knows how to get to the roots of those things. So, anyway, so after I finished seminary is when I started Restoration Center, and that was 2022. I started. So it's just 2 years. And it's mainly online counseling. And as a side note, I've been married 38 years, coming up in 39.
Wow.
And
Congratulations.
thank you. And Jeff and I sold our home in 2020. He lost his job. His contract ended. He was a retired military pilot, fighter pilot. He started working in business after that. And in 2020, his contract ended. So we sold our home and bought an Airstream travel trailer, and we started traveling. So we traveled for 3 years. And as you know, that lifestyle is not for everybody, but it was great for us. But in that time, it highlighted some areas that we needed to work on in our relationship, and specifically in emotional intimacy. And the reason I'm
Mm.
sharing that piece of our story is because so much of porn use is dealing with disconnection, okay,
Right.
from ourselves, from our emotions, and also from other people. And so it really started to make sense once Jeff and I started to see, like, we have a great marriage, but we were starting to see things in this 24/7 little space, 365. Had been kind of skirting around, right? And so I wound up finding this program called Connection Codes. It was developed by Christians. And we went through it together. And basically, it trained us, it gave us the language for how to connect emotionally.
Mm.
Okay. And that was a game changer for us, because then what we started to see was, okay, this was a missing link for our marriage when we were struggling sexually. Okay, now I bring that up because a lot of people, when they don't have that strong emotional connection, will use sex as a substitute for that. And it was never made for that. Or they'll use porn to cope with the fact that they don't have deep, connected relationships. And that made sense for us because early in the marriage, Jeff was using porn, my husband, and really wasn't understanding, well, what is that all about? And then come to find out, my husband was very disconnected from himself. Super smart guy, fighter pilot, da da da, yet was not really aware of what was happening inside of him. And so he wound up, you know, medicating with different things, whether it's achievement or, porn or whatever. And of course, is harmful for relationships. It's not what God wanted for us. So it's interesting because as we started down our journey of really dealing with our relational stuff, that's when the Lord started bringing more and more couples to me. And even though, and Jeff got trained as a connection codes coach as well, so we have this ability to work together. He's not a counselor, but he has learned a lot.
Sure. Sure.
He's learned a
Sure.
lot, and and he's a guy's guy. He's a retired colonel. He's very successful. Flew F-15s. I mean, he's a guy's guy. But he realized, like, oh, I was only operating partially in how I was designed to operate because
Sure.
I have emotions, I have things, but he was really disconnected. He was up in his head the whole time. So it was really hard for him to connect. So that's kind of where our journey has taken us. And as a result, I'm seeing more and more couples and helping people. And often porn is part of their story. It really is. So,
Yeah, that must be interesting, like, when you're working with people and the initial thing that they might bring to you for help, and then I can imagine that porn just weaves its way in there. It comes out through the cracks at
oh,
some point, right?
yeah, 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 it really does. And also, I've for probably 30 plus years, I work with parents.
Mm,
I've done a lot of parenting coaching, a lot of parent classes, and more, I'm seeing people that are like, my kid's seen porn. What do I do about it? Or they're acting out, or they're doing whatever. And it's, the average age of exposure now, sadly, is between ages 8 and 10. And I remember when I interviewed you, Mac, you were saying it was about 10. You know, and when we first
yeah.
were exposed, and it's incredible, the impact that it has, this early exposure. So on brain health, everything else, relationships. So yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing that. That's, I know that's being vulnerable about your relationship, and I appreciate you sharing that, because I think that's it's helpful for people listening, hopefully, like, right now, that you're
Yeah.
not alone, and I think
Oh
also
my
your
gosh, totally.
husband just being such a high achiever, and how it really doesn't really matter how high achieving you are or low achieving, porn affects it can affect you at any level, right?
Yeah.
And and it
Yeah.
was interesting what you said. I really resonated with how he was medicating whatever that spot that was disconnected,
Yeah.
that that porn or achievement, because I think that's really true to a lot of different things, right?
Yeah.
That it could be porn, it could be alcohol, it could be a substance,
Food.
food, or it could just be being a workaholic.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about emotional intimacy, that resonated with me too, because in my past marriage, I mean, that was really something that died, was the intimacy,
Yes.
because the trust just dissolved, because I wasn't being honest and I was spending my time, like you were talking about, somewhere else, to where even if I was present being
Yeah.
intimate, how present was I mentally, or was there something that I maybe I looked at porn the day before or that day,
Yeah.
and then it almost, well, it does, I think, just take away from that intimate moment, right? Because I think about this a lot and I talk about it sometimes, but the time when you look at porn, and then when you talk to your spouse about it, or your girlfriend, your partner, that all that time is, I think, in the other person's mind, a tainted time of, "Hey, you weren't being honest with me during
Yeah.
this whole stretch of
Yeah.
time."
Yeah. Ugh, it is just such a relationship killer, really. And for a number of reasons. I mean, we could talk about the woman side, but just for a second,
Yeah.
just set the foundation, which is God created us with three main soul needs, at least three that I can think of off the top of my head. We have the need for intimacy, which means into me you see. Okay.
Mm,
I'm gonna open my heart, and I'm gonna let you see me, and I'm gonna let you know me. And in a marriage relationship, we were created to be fully known with our husband or wife or whatever. And
right.
if you read in Genesis, I think it's Genesis 4, around there, where it says, Adam, let me think if I wrote that down. I might have done that. Yeah, I think it's Genesis 4. Adam knew Eve, okay? And a lot of times, people think, oh, he knew her and they had a child. I think it said Adam knew Eve and they conceived, or they had their son. But really, what the word is yada, and yada means, it's the same word that is used in Psalm 139, where it says, God, you searched me and knew me. And what that
Mm,
means, it's like completely, fully known. I'm not going to hold
mm,
anything back from you. I'm going to let you see me like God sees me. Okay. And Psalm 139 says, God, You know when I get up and when I lay down. You know everything about me. You knit me together in my mother's womb. And that's the same word used in scripture where it says Adam knew Eve. So it was such a like deep, intimate knowing. And that's what we were created for. And that was supposed to be the foundation for a sexual relationship, right? Like I'm not just bringing you my body parts. I'm bringing you everything. I'm bringing you my whole heart, my whole whatever. And with porn, okay, as you all know, there's a lot of secrecy. There's a lot of I'm not sharing this part of me with you. And guilt and shame gets in there, and of course, all of that stuff makes it very messy. So the first need is to be fully known and fully seen. Okay, intimacy. There's a Christian neuroscientist named Kurt Thompson. We might have even talked about this on our other interview, but he says that we come into this world looking for someone that's looking for us. Okay.
Mm,
We come into this world looking for someone that's looking for us. And that's
mm,
supposed to be fulfilled initially by our parents, right? Where our parents are like, "You're here. I cannot believe it. Like my little baby." And your parent fully gets to know you and advocates for you and tries to partner with God and whatever talents that you have. And unfortunately, a lot of us don't get that in our families. We're not
mm,
fully known in our families. We're kind of pushed aside. I mean, I'm 64, so I'm a different generation. But even still, you get working parents, and I'm not blaming them, but it's like they don't really have the time to get to know their kids, and kids don't feel fully known. But we have that need. We have that. We're
right.
born with that. We want to be seen. We want to be known. So that's intimacy. The second soul need that we have is for connection. Okay, we need to be connected. And part of that is that it's connected to the intimacy need, but we need to be in connection with God and with others. All right? And that's the number one commandment Jesus says. Love God with all your heart and love others as you love yourself. So he's basically saying when people said, "What's the most important commandment?" He's like, love God, love others. You need to be in connection. Okay. And then the third soul we have is for comfort.
Mm,
Okay.
yeah. Okay.
We need to be comforted. We need to be when we have um, when we're a child and we're dysregulated. Okay, 2-year-old is dysregulated. Maybe he's dysregulated because mom said we got to leave the park, and I don't want to leave the park. I'm having fun. And the 2-year-old's dysregulated.
Mm,
And because they can't be, they don't know how to regulate their emotions at 2. But mom or dad or whoever is taking the kid to the park needs to be able to connect with that child's heart, right?
mm,
To say, oh yeah, this is really hard, isn't it, when we have to leave the park? Okay, I get that. Come here, let me pick you up, let me hold you. We're still leaving, but I want to connect with your heart. I want to comfort you because you're not okay right now. And unfortunately, a lot of parents don't know how to do that. They don't know how to comfort their kids properly. They'll just say, "Shut up or I'll give you something to cry about." Or they'll just say, "Hey, we'll come to the park tomorrow." Well, that doesn't make me feel okay right now. I feel actually really sad. Or the parent will say, "Why are you upset? You shouldn't be upset." And so what happens is the child learns, okay, I shouldn't have needs. I shouldn't have
mm,
emotions. I shouldn't have needs. And I wasn't comforted. And therefore, I don't even know how to be comforted because that's how God made us, is to be able to receive that connection from our parents, to receive that regulation, to receive that comfort. Okay. And so here we have people that aren't fully known, okay, maybe by their families, intimacy, lacking need there. They don't know how to be comforted. you know, they're crying little kid, okay? Let's say a little kid falls. This is another example. Falls down, is crying. And mom says, "You're fine. You're fine. Brush it off. You're fine." Here's my thing. If they were fine, they wouldn't be sobbing. They wouldn't be. They're not fine,
yeah.
okay?
Or if you tie in the porn analogy, right? If I was fine, I wouldn't be going to porn to comfort me.
100%. 100%. So you don't have the comfort, you don't have the intimacy, okay? And you don't have that connection because also porn is very isolating.
Very isolating.
Okay. So you don't have those deep relationships. And so it sets up this cycle, which is right to use porn to have those needs met, to have my intimacy needs met. Because, you can be with the person in the porn thing and they're gonna do whatever you feel like you want them to do. And, there's no risk there. I don't really share it's like false intimacy. You're not
Yeah.
really sharing yourself with that. It's like intimacy without the risk, right? When you're in a married relationship and you let your husband or your wife or whatever see you completely, and you expect that unconditional love back, they're going to love you through your worst bits. But when you hide all the worst bits, right, that's not true intimacy. And so porn is the perfect antidote for that. Okay. But those are valid needs that we have, Mac. They are valid. And it's okay to want to be seen. It's really okay to want to have that connection and that comfort. It's never gonna meet that. Porn's never gonna do that for you. Right? So yeah.
Oh, that's great. So
Mm-hmm.
intimacy, connection, comfort. Intimacy, connection, comfort. Intimacy,
100%.
connection, comfort.
And that's why,
Yeah.
Mac, and you know this because you're a coach, you know that when you're trying to get over porn addiction, you can't just have like stuff on your phone, like apps to track where you've been, because that doesn't meet the driver for the porn. That's just like the band-aid fix to say, okay, don't go there. But you're still wanting that comfort, that intimacy. You want to be known. You want to figure out, well, how do I comfort myself? And most people, they don't even know what's happening inside of them. They are disconnected from themselves. Okay, porn is a really convenient way to disassociate. Okay, to disassociate from what's happening in my heart.
Mm.
Where is my pain coming from?
Yeah, gosh, that's great. And Diary of a Relationship Coach just said, "Thanks for this live post, much needed." Thanks
Yeah,
for commenting there. Yeah,
yeah,
that really moves me. That gave me some butterflies, some woo. That was really good. Because I think the I know being in 6 years of recovery and then being addicted to porn for 20 plus years, I think we focus so much on how do I quit it? How do I avoid it? How do I
yeah.
stop myself from looking at it? But from what I've learned and what's helped me out and has on a day-to-day basis allowed me to build this new sense of identity has been those things really when you really dial it in is that intimacy, connection, and comfort. And like you were saying, I think we have to find that in our personal life. We can't just be relying on other people or things to fill that. We have to find deep down inside, how can I meet my needs so that I'm not going to these substances or to porn? Because, like you said, it's never going to provide that for us. It might seem like that initially. And I like what you had to say about the perfect antidote or whatnot. I've called it like the solution at times because we internalize it as the solution, and that's how it gets so embedded
Yep.
and cyclical, and to the point of where, like you were saying with your husband, you don't really even realize how deep you are in this and how much it's affecting your relationships
Yeah.
or your sense of self-worth because it's this almost like this unconscious programmed, "Hey, I'm bored," or "I feel sad," or this and that. Well, okay, well, let's go look at porn. And then as you're going into it that it's not gonna feel good once the deed is done, once you orgasm, it's
Yeah.
just this completely spent
Yeah.
energy to
Yeah.
where you just feel, like, empty and
Yeah.
sad and I used to do it. I use the word numb a lot. It was really for me a numbing agent for me to
Yeah.
where and this was when my marriage was going through dark times, when I was going through dark times,
Yep.
but it would only just leave me feeling more empty,
Oh, yeah.
more sad, alone, isolated, all these words. But then on the flip side, you look at it, and when you are meeting those needs, intimacy, connection, and comfort, it's great. It's a different kind of feeling because it's real and
Yes.
it's God.
Mhm.
It's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's living you're actually living your life, and you're you have a clarity on things to
Yes.
where it doesn't mean things are easy or that you're not gonna have bad days, but what it does mean is that you can make a different choice to meet your needs when you are feeling that way.
Yes. 100%. Yeah, I love that because what you're saying is when you start to meet the need for intimacy, connection, and comfort. Okay. And often that comes through relationships with other people, through your faith community. And also, I would add in there God, because He's the ultimate comforter. He'll never leave you or forsake you. Even when you mess up completely, you can run to Him. Okay, you can absolutely run to him in your worst mess. So having that relationship with him is so important. But so when you're able to do that, life is good in a more of a steady, long-term way, right? It's more like you have those good connections. You get out into nature, like you were talking about hunting with your dad and just having some, good connection with dad, and you're out in nature and you're doing the thing. And that's kind of like a good feeling that's sustained. Where porn, you get the dopamine hit, right? Which is almost like a surge of dopamine. It's not a natural form of dopamine. It's a high surge. And then what happens is the brain compensates and then you get the crash. Okay. And over time, actually, what happens is your brain is like, whoa, okay, so much dopamine. Let's decrease the sensitivity to this dopamine. So you need more to get that same hit, right? And that's where porn can often escalate, where this is not doing the trick anymore. I need a little bit more. I need to go a little bit more intense. I need to do whatever. And then finally, it can actually change your brain structure because your brain is neuroplastic. I mean, your brain can adapt to that same trigger over and over again. And so it can train the brain that I can only get that dopamine pleasure if I do it, if I have that, if I'm connected to porn. I can't have that if I'm connected to a real person. And we see that with people. It's like I can't perform as well, or I don't get as much pleasure, or I have to have sex with my wife while porn is going on. Okay, so there's somebody else
Yeah.
in the bedroom. I like, you know, so it becomes where it's like, oh my gosh, I've just trained my brain in this. And one step further, you do that long enough, and it can actually affect your prefrontal cortex, where your ability to be able to make decisions, impulse control, all of that starts to go down. So we know that that long-term usage can actually change your brain. Okay. So that's where, the when people say, "Oh, it's just porn, it's not bad or whatever." And it's like, "Well, actually, it does impact your brain long term." And I think I remember you saying, Mac, when we had that interview, like you noticed that your interest, this is in your teen years, like with relationships, was lessened when you were getting into porn. You weren't as interested in real relationships. So,
Yeah, I remember this, my first girlfriend, I was just head over heels for her. She was like my first kiss, and I remember I was just in love with her, and but then I started to watch porn, and
yeah,
I remember we were in a relationship, and I felt like I would hit the lottery being in a relationship with her, because I'm like, "Oh my gosh, how am I able to be with her? This is so crazy." But looking back on it, and again, this is in middle school, but I do remember looking back on it, and I just broke up with her out of the blue. I was addicted to porn at that time, and I think I
yeah,
just got bored with the relationship, and
yeah,
all the things that were, complicated. I
Yes.
didn't really want to deal with. It was just like,
Mhm.
whatever. I don't really need to be in a relationship. And I back on that, and it's just sad to think that that was my mind back then. But really, when I do think about it, and even my past marriage that ended in divorce, instead of realizing that this is a part of life and this is actually important, and hey, I can actually grow from this, I could actually learn from this, I can actually have these tough conversations. Instead, I would just go to porn to medicate, to numb,
Um,
to solve my problem, but then it just made it worse. It just made
oh my
the
god.
relationship worse.
Yeah, totally. Totally, totally. And this is why I think it's so important. One of the things that I'm really passionate about in working with couples now, but also parents who are bringing up children, is to teach them good emotional health, which means I need to understand what's happening inside of me. I need to
Mm,
understand when what I'm feeling. And you'd be so surprised, Mac, when I work one on one with people, and I usually use a wheel, that has 8 emotions on it. So
mm.
it'll have fear and loneliness and hurt and guilt and shame and anger and joy. And I'll ask them, we'll go through. I'll say, okay, I need to hear, when did you last feel anger? When did you last feel lonely, hurt, sad? And you'd be surprised how many people are like, I don't
They just
know.
don't know.
You know,
Right.
they usually can tap into maybe anger. Okay.
Mm,
Anger is often a secondary emotion, so there is primary anger, but often we get angry to cover up our hurt, our pain, okay, our sadness, our loneliness, and so we can lash out, and that kind of acts as a protector and it pushes people away. The anger does. But getting people to connect to their own heart so that they can slow down the process. So, in other words, you have that trigger or whatever it is, it's like, oh, I feel like using porn. Or, my clients are just like, oh, I want to go to the fridge. I want to see what's in there. I want to eat something. I want to scroll or whatever that is. It's like, okay, if we can slow that down and just take a minute, you could always use the porn if you feel like you have to. You can always get the ice cream sundae, like whatever. But can we just slow it down for just a minute and see what's going on inside of me? Can you name the emotion? A lot of
mm.
times it's lonely, it's sad, it's like whatever. And here's the deal, Mac. This is what's so cool about it. When you can name it, you can tame it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay?
Yep.
You have to be able to say, dang it, I am so lonely right now. Or I have so much
Oh,
fear. Okay. I have so much fear. I have fear that my marriage isn't going well. I have fear that I'm going to screw up at my job. I have fear that I'm going to, whatever it is. Once you can name, oh, this is what it is. Okay. Just even saying it enables your brain to start to process that. Okay. And then once
love
you
that.
name it, all right, we can figure out, how do I tame that? Yeah, I can use porn, but it's like putting a square peg in a round hole. It's really not going to fit. It's really not going to take care of that fear. Okay. But if you can slow it down and then just say, beginning, yeah, I'm feeling like I want to use porn because I'm XYZ, that gives you that little bit of space between stimulus and response. And you can make that different decision. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a Viktor Frankl quote that's really good about that. I don't know off the top of my head, but it's basically we can regain our freedom in the moments where we can create space between the stimuli and the response.
Yes.
And what you were saying is the feeling aspect of it is a great place to start,
100%.
because if you're not in touch with your feelings, then how are you supposed to really look into the deep roots of this?
Yeah.
It's all just
Yeah.
surface level, like you were talking about, like, oh yeah, I can get accountability software, and I can do this, I can do that, I can remove an app off my phone, which I did that many times. There was times where I literally almost bought just like a a lockbox. That happens sometimes with people. They'll put it like their phone in a lockbox. I did a lot of things. I didn't do that, but there were tactics and strategies I used, right? But at the end of
Yeah.
the day, it's gonna just gnaw at you and it's gonna pull you back in
Yeah.
this if you're not addressing what the root of it is and
100%.
what you're trying how you're trying to meet your needs really.
Yeah. 100%. So it really goes into starting to learn what is happening, understand the wounding. Like for my husband, now I was married for 35 years to this amazing man. Okay. Incredible. Such a gifted, intelligent, successful person. And once we started getting into really acknowledging what has been happening inside of him, I realized he deals with a lot of fear of not being good enough. Okay. He deals with shame. Okay. And lonely, a lot of lonely. And and so that was so crazy to me because he would spend a lot of time in his head, but actually that was as a protection because he didn't really know how to connect to himself and he didn't really know how to connect to me. And so probably in the last 3 years, I've seen my husband cry more
Mhm.
than in our whole entire marriage because he's now much more aware of what's happening inside of him, and he can say, wow, I'm really feeling lonely. And I have learned how to respond to him without trying to fix him. Okay, and that's really
Yeah,
important
sure.
when you're trying to connect with somebody because it's very disconnecting. If he says, "Oh man, I feel lonely," and I'm like, "How could you feel lonely? I've been here with you all day." Okay, so again, it's like that 2-year-old when you yell at the kid and say, "You're fine," and the kid's crying, and you're going, "I'm not fine." So
Mhm.
when I can say to him, "Oh wow, babe, I hear that lonely. What's happening with that?" All of a sudden, guess what? We're connected.
So
Okay.
that's a really good part. Thanks for sharing that. I think that's important for the audience to listen to as well, right? Is it's a two-way street in relationships to have that conversation.
Yes.
And as a man to be able, because I know I struggled with that to where, I mean, just like your husband, I didn't know how to really communicate. I didn't know how to talk about it. I didn't really understand how to even do that, right?
Yeah.
And then that creates tension because if your partner, your person you're with, isn't really getting that communication from you, then they might respond in a way that, like you said, it might make it worse or might
Yeah.
reinforce that isolation and it's almost like a fulfilling prophecy
Yeah.
to where you just like, oh well, she doesn't want to listen to me and she doesn't care.
Yeah.
Well, if you're not even able to talk about it or communicate it effectively, then that's probably the result you might get, and
Yeah.
that's sad. So that's a really good point.
Yeah.
So I really wanted to talk about having you on. Like I said at the beginning, you're the first woman that I've had on the Porn Free Millennial podcast. So I think it'd be great just to hear from your perspective as a woman, uh, just with porn, just being in a relationship where there is porn, uh, just your perspective on that, perhaps what you see with clients. And I think too, just what are helpful ways for women to work through this in relationships because I
Yeah.
know that the term betrayal trauma comes up a lot.
Yes.
I think it's definitely there's a lot of validity to it. And
Mhm.
then there's also on the other side of it to where how do you work through that to where it's not just, hey, I was betrayed and this is just going to always be there, but how are like ways that couples can work through that together?
Oh, that's such a good point. And it's, ugh, my heart hurts just thinking about the pain for both sides, right? Okay. So, from a woman's perspective, obviously, there's issues. Let's just say that the male, her partner, her husband, who whatever that is using porn. And I'm going to address it from a spiritual perspective, okay, to
Okay.
start with. Because some guys will be like, well, listen, I'm not really cheating on my wife or I'm not really cheating on us by using porn. But, Jesus specifically says if you look at a woman with lust in your eyes, you've already committed adultery, right? So it is the way we were connected, the way God made us to be able to connect sexually. It has to be in a place of safety and true intimacy, which is you're my guy, you're my gal, and there's going to be nobody else in our bedroom. And
Mm.
when you bring porn into it, okay, there is a sense of betrayal because spiritually it's the same thing. Okay. And a lot of people don't understand this because they don't look at the spiritual side. Okay. But that's what I do. That's part of what I do is when you connect with another person that's not your spouse. Okay. So you're having an orgasm to watching something or doing something. You are bonding spiritually to that person on the
Mm.
screen or on your phone. Okay. You're forming what's called a soul tie. So you connect with that person. And that's why, you can bring stuff up in your mind. You don't have to be watching anymore. I can bring stuff up in my mind. I'm connected now to that person. And we're supposed to only have that one bond with the person that we're married to. It says in
Right.
the Bible, the two become one. Okay, you become one. There's something that happens when you have sex in the covenant that the two of you become one. Okay, and Mac, you're gonna appreciate this because I know you're not married anymore. But when you bond in marriage, and it's like gluing pink construction paper to blue, right? And when you pull that apart, some of that pink is going to be stuck over here, and some of that blue is going to be stuck over here. And man, that you have bits of each other stuck to each other. Okay, and that was supposed to keep you together. That's why God did that.
Mm.
It's like
Mm.
that's one of the ways that we can help marriage, because if you've been married for a while, it's no joke. It's hard work. Okay,
Right.
it's beautiful, but it's hard. And so the bonding, the connection sexually is partly what God's done for us, is to keep us going. But if you're having all these bonds every time you watch porn and you're getting connected in the spirit, in the soul, having this soul tie with these people, then all of a sudden the bedroom's getting pretty crowded. You know what I'm
Very
saying?
crowded.
It's getting a bit crowded in here because of all these other connections. So in a marriage, it is so damaging because of that, because that's not the way God had intended it. So from the woman's side, it's very hard. Plus, I was working with eating disorders and women I've been doing it for 40 years. There are very few women that are very secure in themselves.
Mm.
And I think part of it is culture. We're sold a bill of rights, or, like a cultural ideal that unless we look like this, then
Yeah.
we're not sexy, or we don't measure up. And so there's that um, what's the word I'm looking for? That inferiority,
Mm.
when your partner or your husband is looking at porn and you're like, well, I totally don't look like that. And it can
Yeah.
exacerbate the feelings of inadequacy in the bed. I don't have boobs like that. I don't do all of that. So that can also be a problem of
Sorry about
intimacy.
my phone. I
No, it's okay.
have it on a suction cup and it keeps dropping.
Oh, I hate that.
But
Yeah.
yeah, sorry,
Yeah.
keep going.
So that winds up becoming a big problem too, and causes a lot of heartache. A lot of fear builds up in women, a lot of sadness, loneliness, all of those things.
Mm.
Now, what's important to remember though is the person that's using porn is not doing it to intentionally step outside of marriage. I mean, maybe there's some people that do that, but
Right.
if the spouse can remember, my husband is hurting, and I know this is so
Mm.
hard. Okay,
Right. Yeah,
um,
sure.
I,
Yeah.
I, I get this. Okay, but if you can remember that my partner is not doing this because he wants to step outside of the marriage, or he wants to do this. He's actually having a hard time connecting to himself, and he's having a hard time connecting with me. Okay. And when I know I'm able to think about that for my husband, whether it's he's acting out sexually or he's withdrawing from me and I'm feeling pain in that, if I can start to know what's going on in his heart and understand, okay, this is a manifestation of his own brokenness, and we can share, and I can pray for him. Okay. I can use tools that I have to pray for him and to pray for me. And this is where it becomes really important with betrayal trauma, with the hurt and pain. If you found out, like, oh, my partner is using porn, and you feel devastated over that, which I get it. I
Yeah.
completely get that. But that's where we have to learn that we've got to go to the Lord, go to God, to be able to process through that, to ultimately be able to forgive. Okay. And listen, if you can't forgive, bitterness eventually settles in, and it's going to become a barrier between the two of you. I'm not saying forgiveness is going to be easy. I'm not saying it's going to happen right away, but that's why spiritually Jesus says you have to forgive. Okay. It's not, if you and I were in a relationship, Mac, I wouldn't be forgiving you for your sake. I'd be forgiving you for my sake. Because if
Yeah.
I don't forgive eventually, I become bitter. And I see my life through the lenses of bitterness. And I'll start to
Mm.
see all men through those lenses of bitterness. So there's a lot of spiritual work that has to happen on the part of the person that feels betrayed. Okay. And that's where when you have a faith, and number one, you know how much you've been forgiven.
Mm.
Okay, because we all hurt each other. Okay, we all hurt each other. I hate to admit this, but I've probably hurt Jeff. I've never acted out sexually outside of our marriage, but I have hurt him tremendously by how I've talked to him, and how I've cut
Mm.
him off, and how I've just put up a wall and things like that. And actually that hurts too. That really hurts too. And so as we have to sort of come into this dance and recognize, wow, we've really hurt each other, and ask for forgiveness and release forgiveness. And that's a part, I think, I would say, of healing from porn that really is important, because there's a spiritual aspect that's there that if doesn't get addressed. Okay, let's
Mm.
say the guy he goes to counseling, and he puts stuff on his phone, and he does whatever. But you don't actually ever sit down and forgive and ask
Mm.
for forgiveness and all of the things. There's this there's this part of you where the enemy can have access, where Satan can have access to your heart. Okay. And it can actually come back at some point to get you. Okay. And you know what I mean when I say get you.
No, it's
Like
that's just
the
really
temperature
well put.
there, it's like whatever.
Yeah,
So
because that was really well said. I really appreciate that's a great wisdom there, because I think that's a different it I hopefully it's good for people to hear listening, but for me I think that is very true. I think I lived through that aspect of it through my past marriage to where
yeah.
I think, oh gosh, okay. I'm just gonna stand it here. That's funny. Okay. Oh, my video's all wide for some reason. Um, does it look wide on your end?
No, you're fine.
Okay, must just be me. Okay, so yes, I lived through that aspect of it to
Yeah.
where it felt like I was just the Sisyphus pushing a boulder up the hill basically just for it
Dude.
to come crashing back down on me. And it felt like I'd be making progress, right? But then the healing just wasn't there. And I think the
Yeah.
missing aspect, like you talked about, really was our relationship with God as a married couple and seeking God out and letting God heal us, both together, but also individuals. But like you said, when you're in marriage, you're together. And I look back on that now, and it's very evident to me that I think if God was more in our lives, in our marriage, that really would have helped out with a lot of things. It would have made things easier, not easy, but it would have helped big time. So I
Yep.
think that's a great message for people listening today on that, because I think as a man, you once you start getting in touch with your emotions and your actions and the consequences, it can be really devastating too. Just to like, I felt just terrible. Like
Yeah.
felt like I murdered my intimacy.
Oh
Like
gosh. Yeah.
this crime scene, right? And how do you recoup that? And but there's definitely hope and healing, and I'm really happy that you touched on that aspect of it.
Yeah. 100%. I remember when we talked before, Mac, you were saying how when you were into your recovery and you had a slip up and you were married then, and I remember
Hmm.
you saying you 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 heard this voice. Okay, you didn't use these words, but basically heard this voice. Listen, this is our thing. You don't have to tell anyone. Like
Right.
this is you don't have to let this be our little thing. I'm expounding on what you said, but it kind of I saw it that way. It's like
Hmm.
what don't you don't need to say. And your wife wound up finding out about it, and she felt so hurt and so betrayed by that. And I think what I remember even before the slip up is you were feeling like you said it was almost like you felt compulsed to go towards that. Like it was like a compulsion. And this is the other piece of it. Again, people don't think about it. But okay, this might freak some people out on there. So if you're not there with me, don't hang up. Okay, just hang with me. But there is a devil. Okay, there is a tempter. And until you get completely set free from this, the spiritual roots of it by Jesus, that tempter is going to be whispering. He'll whisper anyway. But if you haven't said, oh, hell no, I'm going to reject this thing. I'm going to break agreement with it. I'm just going to ask Jesus to come in and set me free from this. There is this compulsiveness to it that can feel like I'm being taken over. And I think
Yeah.
that's the words you used, Mac, was I feel like I'm being taken over.
Yeah, and for context, for people that didn't hear the conversation we had, I think I was close to 2 years sober. I
Yeah,
started my Substack and my podcast back in 2021, and I just started. We just moved. My ex and I, we bought a house, so I moved away from a lot of my support,
yep,
my therapy, my church. Moved away from family, so
yep,
those bad habits started to creep in. And then the night that I relapsed, I just felt felt possessed, felt like I didn't have any other choice,
yeah,
that and I did have a choice, but my inner voice was telling me, "Hey, you just gotta do it. You just
yeah,
have to do it." And then when I did it, I think I told you that I literally my body was shaking. I felt just like I almost convulsed, like I was just
yeah.
so overwhelmed with this just feeling of deep sadness and
Oh
regret, and what did
gosh.
I just do? Because I was really getting really a lot of momentum, I think, with my recovery leading up to that point, to where I was really fired up about talking about it. I think I had my first article drafted, and then I waited for a bit. So, and I tell my story just because, and why I write, it's like a cautionary tale to say, hey, it's not always going to end up. Your marriage might fail. You might get a divorce like I did, and I think, to bring up what you were saying, is that pact I made to just keep this to myself, and to not tell anyone about it, to not tell my wife about it at the time. A few months later, when she found out about it, when I talked about it, I think that was really the death nail in all the progress that we were making, and
Yeah,
I think that really just severed things so much. So, I think just anyone out there listening, I think one of the biggest things I think with porn is it's more or less just being honest about it, and being able to talk about it and be vulnerable. with it, because if you are able to do that, I think that helps rebuild trust,
Yeah.
to where you're talking about with a woman. I think women inherently want to feel safe
Yeah.
and secure. I think as a man, I think about that, but I don't think about that as much because I I more or less feel safe and secure physically with myself. And I think with women it might be different, like with culture, to where there's this comparison, unfortunately, on social media, Hollywood, with porn too, right? So where, and you can see it now with Netflix and just all these streaming shows. It's, I don't even watch it anymore because you literally cannot watch a show without seeing nudity. It's like I don't need, I just, if I'm ever watching something and something's coming up, my girlfriend and I, if we're watching a show, we'll just skip through it. Just be
Yeah.
like, okay, they're having sex, so what? Moving on. But you can see it now, I think, the last couple of years with just what you're just watching on a daily basis, it's becoming more and more sexualized. And then I think as a man and you're watching this stuff with your spouse next to you, your girlfriend, now I can't live life the same way that I did
Yeah.
before, to where you would just watch a movie together and there'd just be nudity and all this stuff. And as a guy, you're like, oh yeah, I wasn't looking or whatever, but you're looking. And it's just unsettling to think about that.
Yeah.
Uh, but yeah, ultimately a little bit of a tangent there, but
I
I
want to
think
jump
what
in
you were,
though, Mac.
yeah, 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 go ahead.
I want to give you a slightly different perspective on something that you said. You said
Sure.
that you feel like women need to be safe in relationships. They do need that safety. And men maybe not so much so. I would argue that both men and women need to feel safe in relationship. And here's
Sure.
the thing, because we're created for that, okay? We definitely have different roles, but I would say, you said, I feel safe in my body. Here's where we cannot
Mm,
feel safe. Do we feel safe to show our whole self in,
mm, mm,
okay? Do I feel safe to share that I just messed up royally? Or do I feel safe
mm.
to share this is who I really am? Do I feel safe to share all of this? And I think for a lot of men, that's really scary.
Yeah, I
You know,
agree
it's
completely.
really scary. I mean, again, I was married 38 years. There was so much I didn't know about my husband, and not that he was like trying to hide from me, I don't think, because I don't think he was aware, because he was so, brought up in a culture of like, you just move on. I mean, plus as a fighter pilot, like, it's like no emotions, push them down,
Well, you
fly your jet,
compartmentalize
drop your
them,
bombs.
you put them in a different compartment.
To put them in a different compartment, there's no place for that. And unfortunately, we don't you don't connect with another human being through logistics. Through, hey, what'd you do today? Oh, I did A, B, C, D. Okay, whatever. You connect to another human being by sharing your heart, by sharing your fears, by sharing your hurt, by sharing your sad, and
Mm,
having that other person say to you, oh, wow. Like when my husband says, babe, I feel shame right now. And I go, oh my goodness, what's going on with you? I'm here. Tell me about it. You know, just to say I feel shame, is a big deal. And to have me meet him in that creates that safety, okay, and that vulnerability. And that's what we have to work towards. Most of us are hiding. We're hiding. We're hiding from ourselves, and we're hiding from other people, and we're hiding from God,
great
and we're
point.
not making that.
Yeah, because that made me think about it too. Is I think when it happens with porn too, like you were saying, and I relate to this, was it was more about my pain and what I was going through than had to do anything with her
Yeah.
or how I thought she looked or anything like that. It was just
Wow.
this internalized program, 20 plus years, just like clockwork, basically, right? To where you're saying with your husband, I relate to that a lot because I think it's hard, I guess, from an outsider's point of view, if you don't struggle with porn, to relate to this, but really it is something that you don't even know really what you're doing.
Yeah.
you've stuffed it down and compartmentalized it so much for years and decades, and no one's ever had a tough conversation with you about it. Like, I really felt like my marriage, uh, 6 months into it was really the first time I had this come to Jesus moment where I realized, "Oh, wow, like, this is really hurtful." And I'm not just hurting her, I'm actually hurting myself and my relationship with God. Because I can look back at all the times I was really distant from God, and those are definitely times I was more connected with porn and disconnected from my spiritual side. And that's really, 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 really important. Like, you've been hitting home this, which I appreciate, but it's your spiritual health.
Oh,
How's your spiritual health doing?
yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. Because here's the thing. Here's where the enemy really gets us with the porn thing. He'll use guilt and shame to keep us disconnected from other people. It's like when you had that relapse with your wife, and you're feeling horrible. Like, it's not just you're coming off that dopamine hit, but it's just like guilt and shame and like all of the things. And the enemy's right there going, you messed up, you can't write a Substack, you can't help other people, like, and that pushed you back for a while, right?
Yep. Yeah,
So
2 years.
yes, but here's the deal, and this is I think we talked about this last time too, but it's such a powerful scripture in Luke 15, where the prodigal son, okay, he tells his dad, "I want my inheritance." Okay, which was outrageous that he did that anyway. So the dad gives him all of his, his inheritance, and he goes off and he spends it on drinking and partying and women, and and he basically loses all the money. Okay, and he's sitting in a pig pen, and he has no food and whatever, and he just thinks to himself, okay, like, this is dumb. I'm going to go back home to my dad and I'm going to beg him and I'm going to apologize and I'm going to whatever. Here's the kicker though. The dad is like literally waiting for this guy. He's watching for him. And so the prodigal comes home and he's like, "Ooh, my dad's going to have a
Right.
go," or whatever. And his father runs to him. Okay. And he puts on the robe, the family robe and the ring and the sandals. And he's like, "Son, let's have a party. You're back home." That's what happens when we mess up and we turn
Right.
to God, okay? We can turn away from the guilt and shame and we run to Him and go, "Dad, I messed up." And He's like, "Come here.
Mhm.
I love you. Let me restore you. Let me put that robe on you. You're that Mac, this is not who you are. You're not a porn addict. You're my son, and you're created for a destiny, and I have a purpose for you, and you are my child, and you're made righteous in Jesus." I mean, this is the best news ever. Porn wants you to stay in the dark. Porn wants you to hide. And when you can get that turn, that you turn, that's repentance, and you turn back to the Father, He's like, "Come here, son. Let me brush you off. Let me have a party. You're home. You don't have to deal with this." Isn't that cool?
It's the best.
I mean, it's the best.
It's the
It's the
best.
best. I love it. I mean, that's like, honestly, like, it's just so cool.
Oh, wow, I love that. It brings me emotion just because, I mean, literally at Easter service, yesterday, they brought out that story to end it, and I
They
I just
did?
think it's such a b yeah, yeah. Because you talked about that, I think, the last time we talked, and what a beautiful, just, story. I mean, gosh,
Yeah.
it's one of the best because I think that's something with porn is, and you're talking about forgiveness, and I think that is from Luke, I believe, when Jesus says, "He who forgives little loves little."
Mm,
And I remember we were in Bible study, I think it was last year, we were going through this passage, and it has dawned on me, it's not just forgiving others, but it's really forgiving yourself. And then on a deeper level, it's accepting forgiveness from Christ,
yes.
which is already done with his sacrifice on the
Yeah,
cross. So it's really accepting Christ as the solution, because once you accept Christ, then you can be forgiven. You
totally.
can accept his grace, the gift, really. And I think that's such a key to struggles with porn and other things is
Yeah.
I think we develop this sense of self self-loathing and
Yes.
self-destruction. And until we realize that we have value, that we are not ever too far from being saved, that
100%.
we are loved, it really just shatters, I think, the what seemed like, and I use this, I talk about porn prison a lot and shackles and chains, but really that just shatters the chains. You just walk right out of the jail cell, the prison, porn prison, which really you put yourself there.
Yeah.
You know,
Totally.
you put yourself there through the lies that
Yep.
somehow became solutions.
Yep.
And when we realize that we're always loved, no matter how far we turn from God, and how how much porn we might consume or whatever levels of it, we're never too far from being saved and loved. And I
Yeah.
think that's a beautiful message that you said too about relationships and having Christ at the center. Is I think that allows us to emulate Christ and emulate those teachings to where we can realize, hey, we this person's not too far from being forgiven. Or, and you still have to obviously put in the work of repenting. You can't just say, okay, I looked at it again, here, where's my
Okay.
forgiveness?
Pause. This is what I want to share with you and whoever's listening. Okay. You hit on such a big part of where people make a mistake with repentance. Okay,
Yeah,
oh
yeah.
God, I messed up again. Okay, here's the thing. It's great. You go to the Lord and you say, Jesus, I am so sorry. I messed up. Okay. And then they don't wait to receive the forgiveness.
Mm,
Okay. They just say, I messed up. Forgive me. And they walk away still filled with guilt and shame. And this is what I
mm,
do with my clients, and this is what I coach, and this is how I work with people, is that when we turn back to him, I'm like, we're going to wait. We're just going to wait with open hands and say, Jesus, I'm going to give you my sin. I'm going to give you that mess up. I'm going to give you that, how I acted out. And I'm going to wait here with you until I receive that forgiveness from you. And I just have them shut their eyes and let them picture whatever they want to picture. Sometimes people picture him on the cross, and they picture like, you know, him just saying, Father, forgive him. They don't know what they're doing. Like, and just
mm.
wait. And here's the thing is he's faithful. It's not just a mental thing like, oh, God forgives me. No, I'm going to wait here till I feel forgiven. And you know what? He shows
Yeah,
up. He shows up. And you
right.
actually feel his love pouring out on you. You can feel him washing away all the filth, all the whatever, and it goes. And that's what people miss they miss out on. And I'll take it one other step and I'll say, okay, God, I'm giving you this sin, I'm giving you this porn, I'm giving you this mess up, I'm giving you that nasty word that I spoke over my husband. I'm going to receive your forgiveness. Okay. And then I'll say, God, what else do you have for me? What other
Mm,
gift do you have for me? Because that's the beauty of the great exchange. We give him our garbage and he gives us his grace and his gifts. Okay. And a lot of times people say, oh my gosh, he's giving me peace. He's giving me cleansing. He's giving me whatever. And it's an encounter. That's what I want you to hear. It's an encounter with the risen Christ. And listen, we can expect it because he's alive. It's not like it's some fable. It's like he is alive. He's here. And so I'm not leaving until I feel forgiven. Okay? I'm going to come to you. I'm going to run to you like that prodigal son. I'm going to say, I messed up again. Dang it. Okay? And he's going to say, come here. And I'm saying, okay, I need to feel forgiven. I don't want to carry around this guilt. I don't want to carry around this shame. It's heavy because that comes from the
mm.
enemy. Okay? So wait, like Jesus said, go to Jerusalem and wait till I fill you with the Holy Spirit. Well, I'm waiting. I'm not leaving until you cleanse me.
Yeah, what a great point. I think that's it's a great way. I found in the moments where I found a lot of healing too is sometimes I just need to get outside, go fishing,
100%.
clear my head, get away from the situation. Sometimes a great thing too is when you're going through that hard talk and you're asking for forgiveness, it's good too to create a little bit of space, right? Where
Yes.
and
Yes.
especially too, we're asking for God for forgiveness, but especially when we're asking from another person,
Yeah.
that's also a great expectation to set out is, hey, like not to expect it just right away, right? Because there's going to be
Yeah.
emotions there, there's going to be a lot, and uh, but I think too, right, what you were saying about asking forgiveness is, yeah, developing that sense or that muscle of actually being earnest about it and being aware of actually what you're asking for forgiveness for. Because I
Yeah.
think that took me a lot of time to figure out in my life of, okay, I might be asking for forgiveness, but am I actually, do I actually know what harm I caused or what hurt I caused?
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's where, when you get good at building emotional safety and intimacy, let's say you messed up and you were still married and you went to your wife and said, "Hey babe, like I messed up last night," you know, and you allow her to process through the wheel, and where she says, "I have so much anger right now. I have so much fear that this is going to never leave us. I feel sad that you
Mm.
chose that over me. I feel guilty that I'm not good enough for you." And you're not correcting her. You're just saying, "I hear you, babe. Wow. Yep. I get that." And you allow her to process through her pain, and you become that safe space for her. Yes, you caused the pain initially, but when you can be a safe space to receive her pain and just go,
Mm.
"Yeah, I hear that." And then say to her, "What do you need right now?
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
sure.
What do you need right now?" And she might just say, "I just need you to leave me alone." And you say, "Okay, I'll give you space. I'll check back on you, whatever." But you let her know, "I'm not running away because I'm filled with guilt and shame." And that's why it's important to do that work first with the Lord, right? So you get that guilt and shame taken off, and where the enemy is like, "Yeah, you did that again." You go to God and you get restored, and then you can be that safe place for your other person to go, "Okay, this is what happened. This is what I did." And you can go through the wheel and say, "I have so much shame. I feel pain that I hurt you. I feel fear
Yeah.
that you're not going to forgive me." And you start to share your heart. And guess what? Now you're doing that work of building intimacy, okay, which eventually is porn prevention. Ta-da!
Oh, that's good. Gosh, this conversation flew by. I know I told you I had to hop off
Yeah,
at
no, it's fine.
7,
Yeah,
but I'd love to talk some more. I think there's a lot of things that we could dive into. And
oh,
I
totally.
just, I really appreciate your time. Folks, if you're listening right now, subscribe to Jeannie. She's fantastic. I mean, just so much energy. And I just feel pumped up talking with you. You're just a great person. You're a great person to have anybody to have in their corner,
Yeah,
I
thank
think,
you.
and it comes through in your writing, it comes through when you speak. So definitely check out Jeannie. And I think before we hop off, I think I have the link to your business too. Let me pull that up really quick. I can plug that into the chat here. But yeah, any just final words of encouragement for people just that are struggling right now? I think that'd be nice to share.
Yeah, thank you, Mac. And by the way, I just want to do a shout out for you too. Like, the work you're doing is incredible. And we talked about how we have these soul needs of connection and intimacy and comfort.
Right.
And if you don't have that in your life, if you don't have that safety in your life, connecting with somebody like Mac, who will walk through and support you, and where you can start to develop that connection, that to show your heart, and this is who I am, I'm not going to hide anymore, is really
Yep.
important. So this is what I would say, wrapping up. Freedom from porn addiction is so much more than putting, apps on your phone or whatever. It's actually getting healed of the root, which are often soul roots. There's usually some spiritual roots in there, because once you open the door to that kind of sexual sin, sorry to say it, but it is what it is, okay?
Hmm.
You really need the Lord to come in there to heal you, and he'll do it. Okay, there's nothing that you've gotten into that is so far from him and his grace. Okay, so if you don't know him, if you don't know Jesus, that's number one. Just say, you know what? I don't want to do this by myself anymore. Like, I'm listening to Mac, I'm listening to Jeannie. They know what they're talking about. I'm gonna ask Jesus, okay, I need your help. Okay, because that's a game changer. Okay. And then the third piece, and we didn't really talk about this too much, but a little bit, is really getting healing in your body. Okay. Because let me tell you this, porn is an affront on your body. It's a form of abuse, in actual fact. It is a form of abuse. Getting your dopamine up like that and all of that. And so again, inviting and saying, body, I'm so sorry. I've been doing
Mm,
that with you. I'm so
that's
sorry.
beautiful.
I created these neurological pathways that are just cray cray right now. I want to actually connect with you, body. I'm not gonna take you through this anymore. I put you through hell and back. Okay. And so that's a piece of it. And it's really good habits, sleep habits, eating habits, exercise, all of that. It's part of the package. Okay. And you guys, listen, you can do it. Okay. There is nothing that you cannot get free from. I promise you. So check out Mac.
Jeannie, thank you so much. Would you like to end on a prayer?
I'd love to. Okay. I'd love
Would
to.
you want to lead us in that before we hop off?
Yeah, I'll lead you in a prayer.
Okay.
Oh, Lord, I know you've done so much today. I know, God, there's been so many seeds planted, and that you are just drawing hearts to yourself right now. You are the ultimate healer. You're the ultimate lover. You're the ultimate restorer. You are the one, Lord, that is looking for us as we look for you. We may not know that, but God, I know that you have your eyes upon every person that's listening to this. And I just ask right now that you would let the scales fall from people's eyes, Lord. Let their hearts be open to what you have for them. I thank you so much for Mac and his work. Lord, his heart to see people healed in this area of addiction. And I ask, Lord, that you would have your way, that this message would go far and wide, that you would heal individuals, marriages, that you would heal families. And I pray this in your name, Jesus. Amen.
Oh man. All right. Well, Jeannie, always a pleasure to talk with you.
It was a lot of fun. Thank you,
A
Mark.
lot of fun. Yeah, everyone, thanks for being on. Again, subscribe to Jeannie, and we'll talk to you later. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.